Hello, I'm Rena, aka DuneFoxx. If you're new here, welcome. And if you've been here before, nice to see you again. Today, I'm going to be unboxing the 1/7 scale Suguru Geto Shibuya Scramble figure from eStream. This unboxing is a bit late. I actually got this figure early in October. The pre-order period for this figure ran from July to October of 2023, and it was supposed to be released late July of this year, but it was unfortunately delayed to September. I'm going to go right in and talk about what you're probably curious about the most: how much this figure costs. This figure is listed with an MSRP of 33,800 yen, which roughly converts to $222 as if making this video. And I got mine from Tokyo Otaku Mode for 227 plus tax and shipping, which came out to a total of $247. For those of you wondering about shipping and the box he came in, his shipping box was actually a lot bigger than the box you're seeing here. I paid around $20 for shipping via EMS, and it only took 5 days to get here from Japan, but it got held up at the post office because the box was oversized and they couldn't deliver it, so I had to pick it up after getting the notice in the mail. The shipping box was 385mm in depth, 385mm in width, and 580mm in height, and the box weighed around 4 kilos. As for the actual product box, it is 250mm in depth, 300mm in width, and 325mm in height, and the box weighs around 2.1 kilos. Like I mentioned earlier, this is a 1/7 scale. The figure itself stands at 258mm or 25.8 centimeters. Since my last Suguru Geto unboxing, there have been new scale figures announced, but none for the Jujutsu Kaisen 0 version. So as it stands, there are only 4 licensed scale figures for the Jujutsu Kaisen 0 version as far as I'm aware. One is a quarter scale, one is a 1/8 scale, and so far there are 2 1/7 scale figures. This and the Furyu Phoenix one, which is supposed to be released this December. I did not pre-order that one. I'm still on the fence, but if the actual figure looks better than the product photos, I might just pick it up aftermarket. Out of the 2 1/7 scale figures, this is the cheaper one, but not by much. So let's get to unboxing this figure. As you can see, the actual product box has no window. It's a pretty simple looking box. No photo of the figure inside, just the name of the character, the scale, and name of the product line. It came with a piece of paper that had assembly instructions, and the figure itself is in a resealable plastic insert with 4 snap button locks, 1 on each corner. The plastic insert is taped pretty well on each corner to reinforce the snap button locks, and right off the bat I don't see any additional parts, so I'm kind of confused as to why it even came with assembly instructions. I can also see some foam attached to both sides of the plastic insert to protect the parts that are pressed against the packaging. The actual figure itself looks to be wrapped securely in plastic, and there are small foam and plastic sheets placed throughout the figure to protect the parts that are touching each other. They're mostly on the effect parts, the layers of his clothes, and his hair. This figure has a good weight to it, but I wouldn't be too worried about plopping it down on a glass display shelf if we're just talking about weight. It can be a little wobbly though. The base seems to have 50 to 60 millimeters worth of flat surface area, but I wouldn't trust it to not topple over completely if you accidentally brush up on it. I wouldn't particularly display this on a glass shelf if you have kids or pets that could potentially bump into it. Speaking of the base, when I first saw the photos of this figure, I was a little confused visually. He's clearly absorbing a cursed spirit, hence the cursed spirit ball in his hand, and the swirl at the bottom of the effect parts, which I'm guessing is the cursed spirit. The ends of the effect parts are tapering off towards the ball, which suggests it's being sucked in, I guess. But to me, logic aside, it looks more like something's being pulled out of the ball because the swirl at the bottom looks like a whirlpool. And in my head, it just makes more sense to have something materializing at the bottom because of the way he's sitting. I'm having a lot of weird thoughts because of how much I've been staring at this figure for this review, and I'm trying to gather my thoughts because I feel like I have so much to say, but none at the same time. Initially, I was super excited about this figure. It's hard not to be because his sculpt is pretty great. He's based off of the Jujutsu Kaisen Volume 9 manga cover, and I love how his base is incorporated into his whole design. As you can see, he comes in one solid piece. I love how he's perched on the effect parts, and the way they designed it is almost seamless. There is a swirl at the base of the figure where his left foot is planted, and an effect part that swirls inwards where his right foot is resting. From the front, it looks very fluid, very natural, but from the back, not as much as I would like. I don't know if they designed the effect parts in the back the way they did for structural reasons, considering he's sitting on the part where the effect parts are intersecting. Personally, I feel like it's a weird design choice because directionally, there's already a clear split in the back. I don't know if I'm making sense here, but I feel like they could have done without the rightmost and leftmost effect part. It would have made it look a lot cleaner from the back, though I don't know how that would have worked structurally for this figure. But it's not that big of a deal, the effect parts still look really good. I feel like my biggest complaint about this figure is his face. I have mixed feelings because in certain angles, his face looks really good, but there are angles where it just looks so off. And I'm saying this because I'm very particular about faces on my figures. Going through multiple clips from the movie, I'm fairly certain this is the kind of face they were trying to go for this figure. There's just something about the face on the actual figure that bothers me a little. I can't put my finger on it exactly, but I think it's his eyes and eyebrows. I feel like the lines under his eyes are too long and it makes him look tired, which doesn't really suit the expression on his face. And the fact that they gave him actual defined lines for eyelids. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he's supposed to have monolids. And the lines around his eyes in his official art or in the movie and anime are supposed to depict the hollows of his eyes and not actual eyelids. That's why more often than not, the lines are only in the inner corners. I also feel like his eyebrows are sitting a tad bit too low and too curved down in the inner corners. But yeah, his face feels a little off to me and it's more noticeable when you look at him straight on. His chin looks abnormally long and pointy from the front and it's curving upwards, but it's not as noticeable from the side. In fact, he has a really good side profile, which brings me back to my point. He looks really good in some angles and off in others. Though I must say it's only really obvious when you look at him up close. From 2 feet away, he looks perfectly fine. If it's any consolation, his hair looks really good, which is the one constant with all the Suguru Geto Jujutsu Kaisen 0 scale figures. They always get his hair right. Moving on to his clothes, the fabric flows really well. The folds on it and the way it moves makes sense. It looks very dynamic. It's very detailed. You can clearly see the intricate patterns on his kesa, which is the apron-like fabric. I'd say the paint job on it is good, not great. There are no obvious paint spills except for one area on my figure, but there is pooling here and there. You'll see this a lot in the gold parts, especially the borders. The lines are not the cleanest, but it's also understandable because there are a lot of folds on his clothes. If there's one thing that's throwing me off, it's the red straps of his zori. I don't know if it's just an issue with my figure, but the one on his right foot has a glossier finish than the one on his left foot, and it's actually very noticeable, so it does bother me. Overall, the figure as a whole has good color. I love how the effect parts are not just black. It's hard to describe the actual color. It looks more like a translucent dark chocolate brown. One thing I do feel like I have to point out is his skin color. The product photos have more of a neutral to almost rosy skin tone, but the actual figure is leaning more towards yellow. He definitely has a warmer skin tone, and it's pretty obvious when you put him beside his other Jujutsu Kaisen 0 scale figures. So should you pick this figure up? This is definitely a great option if you're in the market for a Jujutsu Kaisen 0 version of Suguru. I own all 3 of the licensed scale figures currently out, and I would rank him in the middle. He's great value for your money. He is a good size. It's really a matter of personal preference, but I would always pick a 1/7 scale over a 1/8 scale. Though the Katabukiya one feels bigger than a 1/8 scale, and it's not that much smaller than this. If you don't plan on overloading your shelf or buying a lot of figures and you just want to pick out a couple of good ones, this is the one to go for. He will fill out your shelf nicely.